situation where you find that a party look at the same.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying. You're watching the Daybreak Show right here on Trust Television, reaching you from the nation's capital. Time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. Our newspaper reviewer for today is Ben Sherman, Director of News, Voice of Nigeria, here with us in the studio. Thank you again for joining us on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. Of course, the lead story, as expected, national honors, not for decoration, Buhari tells recipients. It has the writers that says how awardees were selected, recognition, a call to duty, says Lawan. And then you have above the lead story, 14 days after Tinubu, Obi, Kwankwaso yet to commence campaigns, that's on page 72, ASU to decide on strike tomorrow. That's on page 4. IMF says more than a third of world economies to contract in 2023. Now, beside the pictorial there, you have other stories saying cholera kills 233 in 31 states as 173 die of Lassa fever on page 5. We followed due process in acquiring Obajana cement plant. That's according to Dangote on page 6. 2023, CDD pledges to remain neutral, independent. At the footnote, flood, 500 dead, 1.4 million affected in 31 states and the Federal Capital Territory, according to the federal government. And the writer says 146,734 hectares of farmlands, 89,348 houses damaged, more states to be affected. That's according to NIMET and NIHSA. So these are the stories on the front page of Daily Trust. Not forgetting keeping tab with those still in captivity. 11 schoolgirls of FGC Birnin Yawuri, 482 days still in captivity. And then one student of Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, it's been 455 days still in captivity.
All right, let's take a look at the Nation newspaper. It has a lead story that says, I will leave a secured country, Buhari assures Nigerians. And this, the first rider, our president confers national honors on 443 Nigerians, 7 foreigners. And beneath that, there's a pictorial of some of the awardees. Also, IMF cuts Nigeria's economic growth to 3.2%. We also have a story here, strike, how House of Representatives brokered truce between the federal government and ASU. And just above the masthead, Lagos gets approval for Lekki Airport. Oyo Assembly kicks over EFCC's invitation to members. Also, why I'm yet to release manifesto by Obi. We also have an update on the Dangote Kogi State impasse. Dangote Obajana cement properly acquired. These are the major stories on the Nation newspaper for today.
All right, taking a look at the Leadership newspaper this morning, you see that lead story there talks about 2023 campaigns. It says, INEC threatens sanctions as states clamp down on opposition parties. You will also find above the masthead at campaign flag of Atiku says he will end insecurity and hunger. Strike, at last, there's solution in sight, ASU declares. And then you would also see other stories. Flooding, IMF seeks social assistance for farmers to curb food insecurity. You have Wike Bags Award for Infrastructure Delivery. Lawan, Okonjo Iweala, Amina, 444 others get national honors. Okay, I think that this is from yesterday. Let's take a look at more papers.
Okay, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper now. Presidential fleet funding rises to 81 billion under Buhari. And we have the first rider saying, President fails to uphold pledge to reduce aircraft. Budgets for ASO Villa refreshments jumped to 2 billion naira. Nigeria overborrowing to fund non-essential items. This is coming from Dons. Also, we have nation building requires sacrifice. Buhari tells 450 honorees. Lagos developer defrauds 200 house seekers. Victims blame police. Still on the Punch, Osinachi's husband abused her. Singer's ex-employees tell court. Flood killed 500, injured 1,546, says federal government. Also, ASU awaits Buhari on no work, no pay, holds NEC meeting. We also have federal government approves Lekki Ekpe Airport, projects 5 million passengers. Also, Obi unveils campaign team today, Ohaneze Lords Afenifere. We also have federal government eyes $100 billion for SDGs, pledges business reforms. These are the major stories on the Punch.
All right. So let's take a look at this day newspaper. This morning, the lead story says, Buhari, citizens who contribute to national development deserve to be appreciated. Above the masthead, you'd see floods, 500 confirmed dead, 445,000 houses rather destroyed, and then 70,000 hectares farmlands submerged nationwide. These are the stories on the front page of this day.
And let's take a look at The Guardian. Honors, Buhari decorates Lawan, Okonjo-Iweala, UN scribe others. We also have Stop Blame Games, campaign with Buhari's records. PDP tells ruling party. Lagos receives approval for Lekki Airport, commits to capacity building. Still on The Guardian newspaper, IMF downgrades Nigeria's growth prospects amid pessimism, tension. Obi a national movement, Ohaneze declares. Then we also have how military corrupt NNPC officials, others steal Nigeria's oil wealth. From this is coming from Edwin Clark. These are the major stories on The Guardian for today.
All right. So let's get perspectives to some of these stories. Ben Shemang is here with us. Thank you again for joining. Now, one story that is quite striking is the issue of the flood, the impact of the flood. We are saying that the figures are out now. The federal government is saying that 500 people have died so far, and then not to talk about, the thousands of houses that have been destroyed and people displaced, and then farmlands also that have been submerged by this flood. Apparently, we are in for a whole lot of impact in the coming days and months, isn't it?
Absolutely, because NIMED is also warning that more of these floods are coming. And of course, it's natural occurrence. What can we do? Some few items or things could be done. Now, people have been calling for the dredging of River Niger, River Benue. Yes, we can dredge all of that, make it deeper, but again, at the expense of creating some gully erosions somewhere, somehow. Environmental impact assessment will have to be done. Some of the pillars of the bridges, Niger Bridge, Benue Bridge, or bridges, we have to take care of that dredging. And of course, Labo Dam in Cameroon, I think there is a committee in Nigeria here. They are supposed to be meeting every time, in fact, twice a month, to assess. Look, if the level of water has reached so, and we've not even reached the middle of the rainy season, I think they can start releasing that water gradually, so that the impact is not as big or as huge as it is, or as destructive as we've seen. Farmlands are gone. Now, that also tells you, in terms of gross domestic product, feeding ourselves, to be able to do some other things. If we don't feed ourselves, we can't be able to do many other things. Now, if farmlands are gone, of course, hunger is coming in. So how do we salvage a situation like that? I think too that people should start dry season farming, so that you don't do the usual rainy season farming when rain will come and do sweeping. Olam farms in Nasarawa State, go to KB, they all are crying. I mean, rain has submerged this, and they are getting rotten, the plants themselves, the crops, you know. There was even a time before the rain could come, somewhere in Jigawa, Kano State too. There was no rain. Those who indeed did some dry season farming, they didn't take care of the irrigation properly. And at the point, the rice were just drying and going, withering. At the point, they had to do a giveaway sale to herders so that they would just use it to feed cows. And they were buying it at a very ridiculous kind of prices that these people spend so much to farm, and they are not getting some things for it. And that's why when you look at IMF saying, look, we just have to cut down our vision in terms of your growth.
You know, Mr. Sherman, when I was looking at the videos of the floods, and I was thinking about that, and then the IMF's projection. Yes, it says in Daily Trust that third of world economies to contract in 2023, but particularly in Nigeria, it says that it initially projected a growth of 3.4%, but now it has reduced it to 3%. But when you look at the magnitude of the devastation, are you even sure we're going to get that 3% growth?
Well, as Nigerians, we're always a hopeful people. We believe in tomorrow with hope. And if truly we begin to take some things into consideration, like we are saying, why don't we change this usual rainy season farming? Why don't we at the point begin to also harvest this rain that is causing these floods that are causing havoc here and there? We should harvest, channel them into some of these dams so that we use them for dry season farming. And if we engage everybody, making the fertilizer also available, I'm sure what we are doing economically, internally, economically, you see that we have some elements of growth instead of import, because we are assessed more by what we create internally, what we can do to feed ourselves, rather than what we import as a kind of dependency nation.
So talking about dams, in the aftermath of the 2012 flood in Lokoja, we understand that as part of recommendations to avert future occurrences, some buffer dams, the construction of buffer dams, was recommended. But I don't think that has happened. And here we are again. It's more like the same circle repeating itself, and we keep shouting Lado Dam, as if Lado Dam exists in a vacuum, as if there is no any kind of agency or kind of responsibility on the part of government to monitor these things and avert, or I would say at least control how it happens.
Absolutely. You see, we ought to have Lake Chad River Basin working with Cameroon, Minister of Foreign Affairs.
And our president is actually the president of that Lake Chad Basin Commission.
And where it is also necessary, what is supposed to be the job of this Nigerian Governors Forum? We begin to look at, if we say let's have some mini dams here and there to tap this water, cage it and use. I mean, it's better than every time, right from election, they still run offices as if they are campaigning to be elected, when indeed it's like they've forgotten they've been elected, they've been sworn in, they're supposed to be giving us dividends of democracy. We are supposed to be seeing Nigerian governors working in tandem to see that a situation, this national disaster, is a kind of control. Or what advantage can we take of it? Outside, some people who just are now using canoes to ferry people within streets in towns, those are the people, in fact, the correct idiomatic expression would be fishing in troubled waters. That it is just that bad situation we have that some people are making money, like those who are paddling canoes here and there. this is oddity. It is a time that is so bad for Nigeria.
All right.
And we think that the governors should actually work in tandem with the federal government to ensure that mini dams are all over the place. And when we are busy doing some campaigns, you now look at this Murtala Bridge around Kotonkarfi, Jamata area. Honestly, tankers, trailers, all loaded. You could see cows being trapped there. They are now carrying the carcasses and throwing them away. Again, another environmental
exactly,
problem for us.
which leads me to what I was going to say next. We have seen that there's a story here that says cholera kills 233 in 31 states, you know, as 173 die of Lassa fever. With this, you know, flooding, you know, that we are experiencing now, what's your projection as to the rise in numbers?
Well, like I said, I just want to be optimistic that I hope it will not reach at that point. But like I was saying, you could see that some people having trailer loads of cows, you just carry the carcasses, you throw away. The people within the environment are protesting. Why are you leaving these dead animals for us to bear the brunt? So cholera will come in. And I hope that even this rain that is available there will just carry this thing away. But when you carry, where are you taking it to? It's going to be deposited again down where you also have some other settlements. It's not just a win-win situation for us. And this is where also the health, I mean, where will you talk about health facilities in Lokoja when everything has been overcome? Look at Benue. See Makodi, what is happening. See areas of Taraba. I mean, quite a lot of things will have to be done. If we have just been inundated, nature is challenging us. What do we do smartly to also show nature that we are human beings with some intellectual capabilities?
Mr. Shema, it's a good thing you said, what do we do smartly? Because now this disaster has occurred. The next thing we're going to see is going to be distribution of relief materials that may not even do much for these people. Now, before this disaster, inflation was at 22%. With this disaster, we can only imagine what's going to happen. Have you seen any consolidated effort to look beyond this disaster? What is going to happen to the general economy of the country and how to prepare for it beyond the distribution of relief materials?
When you talk of relief materials, if you give some people some clothes to wear, okay, they can wear that for a whole week. But when you say food, where are you also getting the food to share to people? And Stella, I just saw these video clips they share here and there. A landlady just felt she should just land on tenants. And she was busy carrying mattresses, carrying bags of gari and throwing them out of the float, asking for her money. That is man's inhumanity to fellow man at its lowest ebb. I mean, what's that thing called love? So back to the issue nationally, honestly, I think government should do more. If we're going to imbibe dry season, let us do it so well, so much, so quickly to intervene in a situation. And if you check of recent, there are some findings, research findings, where some maize can do within some shorter period, rice, have highland rice, not necessarily going to some swampy areas and all that. If we can do that, there are some beans that can yield 2-3 times in a season. Why don't you do all of that as a quick fix situation? Outside that, if we are going to go importation, then the essence of trying to make sure that the Nigerian farmer benefits from what he
Mr.
gets,
Sherman,
will not be.
You know, one major concern right now is the fact that this flood is coming just a few months to the elections. Do you see people, the politicians and the leaders actually coming together to look for a proper solution to this with the elections just around the corner?
Stella, you see, as we are talking, tell me the political campaign team, either of PDP, APC, or Labour Party, that is getting it right. And of course, we are seeing that when INEC says, look, start your campaign, this is the time has come, who indeed has launched outside PDP just yesterday, you just see that they are busy not getting it right at the expense of some things that are supposed to be done to the electorate. What are these things? We ought to see people telling us, look, this flood, I think we should be talking of having some alternative routes. For that reason, we are going to cut off so and so area by having some bridges. Bearing in mind the consequences, see how Lokoja is holding this nation at the jugular vein. Okay,
so, you know, while we talk about the Lokoja axis and the route there, some people are saying, well, perhaps if we have other means of transportation, this may not have arisen. Now, Abuja, for instance, is feeling the brunt because there's a disruption in the supply chain for, fuel into the federal capital and neighboring states, of course. So some are saying that if we have maybe train services, connecting, the north and the southern part of the country, and then perhaps other routes, we may not have to deal with this necessarily. What's your take?
I agree with you, provided to the areas where the rail lines are also passing are not being submerged. If they did, of course, the train is heavy. For it to pass there, there has to be a consequence. But we pray it's not so. And having said so, it can't be everywhere that will be flooded if you have the train services. And you can't have traffic jam in a railway situation. One passes before the other. And of course, it will ensure haulage of these necessary goods. Even the petrol we're talking about will ensure proper haulage. The cows that are dying here and there, and will ensure proper haulage. So we think that there has to be some more ways. Like when Ben Ayadi had been talking of having an express to link up with Benue. Benue links up with Lafia here, that's Nasarawa State, then to Abuja, to ensure some of the cashews, some of the items being produced in Middle Belt, ginger from southern Kaduna, they take it via the deep sea port there. That's another alternative. But you see that why do people talk of Cotonou Port? I mean, goods meant for Nigeria, you now have to go bath in deep sea in Benin Republic. And from there, you remove them via smaller ships to Apapa Key or Tinkan Island port. So that does not augur well for our economy. But, so we do need deep sea ports as alternatives to carrying some of these things. Yes, the railway has to be there. And of course, I mean, nothing wrong with having the air transportation, cargo flights here and there, and we ensure that goods are delivered as to when due to those who need it.
But as a follow-up to what Ayuba said, apart from the fact the cargo airports and all of that, even the roads, this also brings to bear the state of our infrastructure, because some of the roads the alternative routes that the cars tried to use, the roads were in bad condition. About 3 days ago, the cost of gas went up by 30 naira. And the reason they gave was because they said they spent longer hours on the roads because they were impassable. So if those roads were in good condition and this flood happened, they could have easily, used those roads.
I agree with you. The roads are always bad, cutting of corner. When you are given the contract, they say, oh, this is going to be the width, and this is how thick it's going to be before commissioning. But who indeed goes to check in terms of standards? Some swampy areas we're supposed to have heaped some stones before you do your job. You just cover it with some sand. And when we're talking of load, the way that a certain trailer is supposed to carry to pass some areas, they are overloaded. You see the roads just cracking, giving ways soon after commissioning. Bridges are collapsing because trailers are carrying more than, bridges are carrying the weight of what they are not supposed to be carrying.
So we have natural disaster, we have corruption also.
Exactly. And you can imagine for how long bridges, those trailers, petrol tankers with their content all standing on Murtala Bridge without movement for days, for a week or almost 2 weeks. I mean, the pillars are bound to be sinking a bit. So in the end, there has to be what you call assessment to see the integrity of these bridges. Are they cracking? Are they capable of collapsing? If they do, where's the alternative? And so I think that by way of projecting so far, we should not just always be thinking of palliatives.
Right.
We should be putting permanent structures
so
on ground.
it means that after the flood, we have a lot of work to do in terms of evaluating the strength or the capacity of the bridges to continue to function. And so if there's need to look at it, then, but for houses, there are houses that have been submerged for days. In water, and then perhaps the water is going to dissipate. Are those houses going to be habitable?
They are going to be habitable in quote. They are becoming habitable because the owners do not have alternatives, and they live there at their own risk. You showed a clip here where somebody in Benue, Makodi, was saying, or was it Taraba? Look, they woke up only to find some snakes occupying the houses. I could see that some hippopotamus were going in droves. They were following the water down. I mean, was that from Benue downwards going to the sea? It also means we are losing out in terms of even tourism. Animals are being chased out of their natural habitat. Now, back to where people are supposed to live. At the point we were saying people should not live in valleys. I mean, even the hilltops have already been taken over. Where do people move to? So maybe we now begin to talk of new settlements, new towns. I do remember that at a point during PDP Shama days in Katsina, they decided to do a ring road around the old Katsina. And that gave room for expansions. I saw that Kano also is trying to do another new settlement.
All right.
If Lokoja can do same, or Kogi state government, and many other states can replicate that kind of new settlements, of course, that would be a better way.
Okay, so quickly, before we round up, the lead story on the Punch newspaper says, presidential fleet funding rises to 81 billion naira under Buhari. It has the writers that says the president fails to uphold pledge to reduce aircraft. So we've had this, campaign talk, prior to this administration, where there have been talks about, the money that goes into maintaining the presidential aircrafts, and the needs to reduce them and all that. But on the flip side of it, we are seeing an increase instead.
Well, sometimes some of these things, they go with some pride. What do I mean? The developed world, you see that some British Prime Minister or something will just join British Airways and they land there, no problem. You see people driving, government people occupying big places, they drive to some shops, buy things and go. But back to this aviation matter and even the security presidential air fleet, they call it PAF. You see, that 001, Nigerian Air Force, it's a pride to Nigeria. When you land it somewhere, you don't have Air Nigeria, where you have the green, white, green. It's a Air Nigeria. Sometimes when you land, people feel, oh, this is Nigeria. But if at the point of campaign, before 2015, the president was saying, look, vote me in, some of these things will be reduced, and he has not reduced it. But at the point, some were handed over to the Nigerian Air Force. And if it was handed to the Nigerian Air Force, I think that it would be wrong, therefore, for us to say they should be sold out. They've been given to the Nigerian Air Force.
Yes, but what about the funding that have risen now? Presidential fleets, the funding for them have risen. So what could have, been responsible for the rise in the cost of maintenance and the rest of it?
Look at the aviation industry generally. Is it the Jet A1? And in terms of what they call housekeeping services of aeroplanes, see, the moment you do service, today is 12th and you're supposed to last for a certain period.
Mr. Sherman, isn't the fact that there's increase in Jet A1, there's no forex for maintenance of this aircraft, isn't that a reason to cut down the number?
Well, I agree with you. You can cut down by dashing that to the Nigerian Air Force.
How about dashing more so that it goes down further?
Well, mostly those who need it, since we are not doing air transportation the Nigerian way, I can see that they're now having to have a Nigerian airway via the Ethiopian airline. But I think that it's not the place where Nigerian aeroplanes should be sent to. But I think the Nigerian Air Force, the Nigerian Navy, they also need some of these things. Security agencies, they need some of these things. Even in terms of surveillance, we're talking of how many porous entry points, illegal entry points in Nigeria. If some of these doniers we're talking about can go around, why not? And even if they are C-130s, the Air Force will need many of these things. And they all fall under the Presidential Air Fleet. And so let them go to the Air Force, let them go to the Navy. I can see that the Nigerian Army is also establishing what they call the Air Wing, because operations today are not just the army should remain just on the ground, Air Force up there. The Air Force is also establishing what they call the ground wing, so that when they dominate air up there, they can also send paratroopers to hold the ground. So I think it's not too bad a deal at all.
All right, thank you so much, Ben Sherman, for joining us on the news review this morning, newspaper review. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Our guest reviewer is Ben Sherman, the Director of News, Voice of Nigeria. With that, we have come to the end of this segment. We'll take a short breather, and then when we return, Daybreak continues. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that